Doom: The Dark Ages may have the tagline of stand and fight, but I can promise that you won't be doing a whole lot of standing. The 22 mission campaign will have you zipping across battlefields at breakneck speeds as you parry Hellsarge barrages, shred through demons with fragments of their fallen comrades, and unleash godlike abilities that push the power fantasy to its absolute limits. From the moment you first open the game, it's impressively apparent that id Software has put forth great effort to ensure that the Slayer's medieval war against Hell feels like an entirely different breed of Doom. While the opening act offered a handful of shortcomings that occasionally left me feeling uncertain towards the beginning of my journey, the Dark Ages had confidently solidified itself as one of, if not the best entry in the entire franchise by the time I reached the conclusion. Today's early review of the game will remain spoiler-free, and the gameplay used will only feature the first 8 Slayer chapters, 1 Hell level, a single Dragon and Atlan mission, and 0 in-game cutscenes or narrative sequences. This video will be followed by a full spoiler review around launch where I go in-depth on the late-game weaponry, full boss fights, vehicle combat upgrades, difficulty sliders, final levels, and the entire story. Be sure to subscribe because you do not want to miss that. The Dark Ages is eager to teach you a new iteration of the Doom dance that combines the horizontal projectile mazes of the classic trilogy with a distinctly weighty twist on the modern formula. The game is more than aware that most players will be used to the movement and verticality of Eternal when starting the campaign, so you will be able to rapidly sprint across sprawling battlefields and launch yourself into the air whenever you please, giving you a much needed agility advantage that a significant portion of the enemy roster lacks. You won't spend the majority of your time in the air though, as Dark Ages is focused on moving through monsters where the previous 2 entries had you moving around them as you dished out rockets and shotgun blasts. I was often pulled into a very satisfying loop of using the more extreme movement options to reposition myself and avoid projectiles before slamming into a battalion of Hellspawn and unleashing a flurry of melee strikes and heavy gunfire. The transition between swift, close-quarters combat and lighter movement-focused attacks feels smooth as butter, and that's due in no small part to the reworked Glory Strike system. Jumping into the air as you deliver the final blow does activate a traditional Glory Kill animation, but most of your time will be spent executing demons with singular strikes using melee weapons of your choosing. I personally feel like Dark Ages would be a significantly worse experience if they had kept the old system. Even the most difficult encounters feel like one fluid, continuous motion from beginning to end. You're always on the move even while delivering finishers, and it only works as well as it does because you aren't constantly stopping to watch predetermined animations. During the later levels, I frequently found myself in a position where a handful of enemies will be staggered at once, and I was able to quickly dispatch them while also battling incoming threats at the same time with no problem at all due to the unsynced executions. There's an incredible synergy between the melee attacks, standard firearms, and the shield saw mechanics that produce a never-ending combat loop where you almost always have exactly what you need whenever you need it without having to worry about resource management. These tightly connected systems are further elevated by the spectacular ever-expanding equipment progression. As soon as you start the campaign, the Slayer is fed a constant stream of new tools and integral resources that allow you to adapt and evolve as the challenge begins to rise. Certain attacks start to pair well with others in a natural way that gives you plenty of opportunities to create unique combos that cater to your specific playstyle without needing to put much thought into it. Some weapons initially felt a little awkward, and I wasn't certain that everything would find a proper place in the toolkit early on, but by the end of the game I was fully utilizing each gun aside from the Skull Crusher. These 2 weapon variants aren't bad or useless by any means, I just haven't found a legitimate use for them yet. Doom: The Dark Ages gets really good once you reach the final 6 or 7 levels. You spend the first 2 acts growing stronger and learning exactly what works best, and then put that to the test upon entering the closing act. Everything starts to come together in a satisfying way that honestly far surpasses Doom Eternal at times. There's one chapter prior to the conclusion that's just beyond phenomenal. It instantly became one of my favorite Doom levels ever, and I'm confident that the majority of you will fall in love with it. As someone that doesn't really like parrying in games and is fairly annoyed by its inclusion in tons of modern titles, I was fairly surprised by how much I enjoyed it here. It's been implemented in a way that adds another layer of depth and challenge to the combat without disrupting the overall flow, and it never felt out of place despite being new to the franchise. The system definitely has its flaws though, as I found that some encounters would throw tons of melee-based enemies into the battlefield and you would get stuck performing parries over and over again as you tried to squeeze out of a crowd that had formed around you. A few super heavy demons will also unleash a barrage of attacks that have to be parried in quick succession, and it's often a test of patience more than anything else. Perhaps that's something that I'll come to enjoy as my skills improve, but at the current moment I find two particular super heavies to have an unusually annoying attack pattern. Don't get the wrong idea, parrying definitely manages to feel like a natural extension of the combat loop in most instances, but the occasional overusage of the mechanic would slow encounters down and cause unnecessary frustration in the more extreme cases. The sheer variety of monsters and the interesting ways that they're utilized in each battle keep the game feeling fresh until the very end. Each demon has its own set of unique close and long range attacks that often complement the rest of the roster. It's allowed them to create some pretty challenging encounters that not only require a mastery of your currently unlocked skills, but a bit of strategizing as well. Every creature synergizes well with the environments, player attacks, and other hellspawn in a way that makes the entire experience feel super tight. There is rarely a moment where brawls felt unorganized or unbalanced. While some fights can be avoided, there are a number of forced battles that are specifically designed to make sure that you have a firm grasp on what they've given you so far. They start to appear fairly early on in the game and pop up every once in a while just to make sure that you aren't getting lazy or avoiding certain mechanics. Most of you should be able to push through after only a few tries, but I can definitely see the harder encounters filtering out those who aren't efficiently upgrading their weapons or properly utilizing the parry. The Dark Ages put so many demons on screen at once that it manages to rival classic Doom at times. You really do feel like a one-man army going toe-to-toe with the full force of hell. Even with that being said, I never really needed to carve a path through seas of fodder just to make room to clash with heavier demons, and that was a bit of a letdown. I would spend a considerable amount of time jumping in between groups of stronger foes and only seek out fodder when I needed an extreme resource boost. They didn't play a huge role in the larger arenas, and I hope that changes in the post-launch expansion. Generally low enemy density outside of dedicated encounters is a bit of a recurring issue throughout the first half of the campaign. This entry offers two types of Slayer mission structures. Some levels will give you a straightforward path that loops back around and opens up as you backtrack, while others will give you a handful of objectives and let you tackle everything at your own pace, similar to the Foundry level in Doom 2016. Both of these structures have segments where you're just casually running around as you search for secrets and backtrack to unlock crucial resources. You will encounter surprise monster closets and the occasional secret fight, but the earlier levels are weirdly empty as you roam around. Siege Part 1 is the first truly open level, and it's easily the worst offender. It's not a bad level by any means, but there's a lot of areas without a notable enemy presence, and things tend to feel a bit disjointed as you go between areas. Thankfully, both formats receive major improvements by the halfway point. Open levels become more compact and properly connected as the number of side objectives and smaller corridor battles increase substantially. Some secrets are surprisingly expansive and reward the most dedicated players with must-have resources like gold caches, sentinel rubies, and wraith stones alongside codex entries and the collectible toys that everyone loves. A handful of hidden encounters are featured throughout the initial dragon segment as well, but the rest of them tend to be pretty short and don't offer a whole lot of optional content. Length matters a lot when it comes to the vehicle segments. I wasn't a fan of the sluggish dragon combat when I played the game at a press preview event, and I still didn't care for the first mission even after they increased the speed at launch. But they managed to really hook me with the presentation and format of the sections that followed. It really drags on during the opening with objectives that are too far apart and enemies that are boring to fight, but the introduction of smaller maps, more complex attack patterns, and faster segments cemented as a fun pacebreaker experience worthy of being in a Doom game. The same can most certainly be said for the Atlan Mech. The rising difficulty and exciting narrative doesn't do a whole lot to prevent your first experience with it from overstaying its welcome, although the incredible weapons, stronger abilities, and better paced missions that appear later down the road give these weighty set pieces a much needed boost that nearly lift them to the same level as the Slayer combat. Despite featuring a good handful of Sentinel missions, the themes across all level types never feel overly repetitive or stale. There's a diverse set of locations even within Argent du Nord that take you to crazy places you would never expect to see in a Doom game. The story elements and environments get so wild by the end of the campaign that it starts to make you wonder if they'll ever be able to truly top this. I'll touch on this a bit more in my spoiler review, but the location of one specific chapter is so perfectly Doomed that it will leave you speechless as you question how they've never done this before. I don't want to give away too much as this is a spoiler-free review, but I will say that the narrative is pretty solid. It's obviously not a generational story that will be praised as one of the best ever told in a video game, but it is interesting enough to justify its existence. You're given a well-crafted mix of compelling characters, shocking story beats, and badass moments that push the game forward as you explore never-before-seen locations and take on cosmic threats. You probably won't care for it if you aren't a fan of story in Doom, but it's presented in a much better way than what we got in Eternal and its expansion, so I'd say that most people will be invested to some extent. I was a huge fan of the more cinematic music tracks that play during key moments in the narrative. It gives everything a more legitimate and serious feeling that hammers in the idea that it's a genuine tale of war and deceit, instead of just being another compilation of hype moments and aura like Eternal. Finishing Move Inc. absolutely knocked it out of the park with the soundtrack. The combat music is heavy and gritty in a way that differentiates itself from everything that came before it while still coming across as distinctly Doom. I need more time to form a full opinion on everything that I've heard, so I'll include more specific opinions and even some slight gripes I had with the spoiler-related tracks in my follow-up review. One of the most difficult parts of writing this video has been the final rating. For me, it's one of those rare games that truly ascends beyond the traditional review system, making it difficult to give any sort of actual number, as a 9 out of 10 feels far too low, but a perfect 10 wasn't achieved here. I've spent around 30 hours with the game on the PlayStation 5, and yet I still don't feel equipped to give you a firm score, or confidently say that it's better or worse than the previous modern entries. It is a game that I would highly recommend not only to hardcore fans of the franchise, but also to casual players who have enjoyed the Slayer's recent ventures, lifelong fans of the original classic trilogy, or newcomers looking to jump into Doom. Don't go in expecting a sequel to Eternal, and be willing to give the game time to really find its footing, and you'll undoubtedly come to love this twisted medieval take on such a legendary FPS franchise. Delivering Doom news to such a magnificent community over the past 5 years has been an absolute honor, and I want to thank every single one of you alongside Bethesda and id Software for giving me the chance to create this review and the follow-up that should be on screen after it releases. I genuinely mean this from the bottom of my heart. Your support has meant the world to me, and I hope that you enjoyed the result of years worth of work that couldn't have been done without you. I think that's all that I have for now, though. Until next time.